World Talk with Friends. I'm Nancy Hopkins. We've got Colleen Kelly producing. We've got Nora Willow, who is our co-host, and we have Jan and Bill Moore. It is June 29th, 2016, and we are going to really, I'm going to sort of sit back in this one because we're going to be talking about Europe today, and we're going to be talking about the European Union, and we're going to be talking about I guess they're calling it Britex, the British voting to leave the EU. Now, before we even start, I think it's important to understand what we're talking about when we talk about Britain and the United Kingdom, because it is confusing if you kind of don't know it. So what we've got here is that the United Kingdom is actually made up of 4 different countries, I believe. It's Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and what is it, Britain? I guess it's Britain,
England.
Right? England, that's it. Thank you very much. And this is also called Great Britain, but it technically is the United Kingdom. Am I correct, guys?
Yeah, I think so. I always get it confused myself, so I shouldn't worry too much.
Well, I had to look it up to make the map, so I'm not sure of it. So why don't we do it this way? Now, just so I can introduce who our guests are, Bill and Jan have a nonprofit organization, and hopefully we can get to explain a little bit of that. They are dear friends and extremely competent to talk about this subject because Jan, you probably detected the accent, grew up there. And Bill spent many years there, and that's how they met, and now they're in the United States. Of course, we've got Nora, and the last time we talked to Nora, she was in Qatar, but now she's in Italy. So why don't we just let Bill or Jan or both of you just kind of lay out what it is that happened, and then, Nora, you guys just talk, because you're in Italy, you've got a perspective on it from the Italian standpoint, and I just want to hear you guys talk. So, Bill, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nancy. I'm coming at this from the perspective, as you told the listeners, of the fact that I lived in the United Kingdom for 14 years. And I basically found, moving from the United States to the United Kingdom, that everything mainstream media had told us about any other country, be it the UK, Russia, or anything, pretty much was all a false set of realities. And Britain was quite different than what I had perceived it to be from what we talk about it. One of the things that I said, that with the fall of this British thing, obviously Jan and I have some funds that have come over quite short of what they were because of the drop in the pound. And there's a lot of people made a lot of money out of the exit, but then there's a lot of people that make a lot of money out of everything, whichever way they leverage it. But one of the things that I, from an American perspective, looking at it and what's happening over there, that I felt like was, to me, and I don't want to oversimplify this because I know it's a very complex topic, and of course Nora and Jan are going to be talking very heavily from that side of the ocean, as you will. But one of the things that I found is, although there's a lot involved, and during this show I'm sure you'll be digging into this, that could go either way. There's a lot of propaganda going on out there, both in America and Britain, and probably the European countries. There's also a lot of stories flying around as to which side of the fence this was. If the Rothschilds and Soros and all of the dark side, as I call it, or the evil ones, did this on purpose and, maneuvered it to make a bunch of money and to further the New World Order agenda. Of course, on the light side, there's a huge amount of evidence that this is the beginning of the end, the unraveling of everything that dark side had built. The one thing that, when I said oversimplifying, that I would have to say is, I think one thing that everybody does, no matter what side they're looking at, sometimes people get really caught up in a story and they tend to overreact or get over uptight. And I was telling Jan, you know, growing up in Fort Worth, Texas, there was a lot of times over the years that federal funds got cut off or something changed, and there was a change, but everybody worked through it. So, you know, that's kind of the common ground now, is finding out what the real story is, in my humble opinion, is finding out what the real story is and building a strategy to move forward with it. And I'm keeping my finger on the side of the fence that says the light side's winning and everything's starting to unravel and we're going to see some good come out of it. So that's kind of my perspective, Nancy, and I'm sure the girls will be able to give a much more European flavor to it now. Thank you.
Appreciate that. I really do. Jan, Nora, which you got any, either one of you, I don't care. Nora?
Well, first of all, hi everyone. Thank you for having me. It's the first time I'm actually a co-host on World Talk with Friends, so I'm very excited. And I thank Bill and Jan for being here with us. Obviously, I mean, I don't have that much experience. I just moved to Italy. It's been just about a week and a half, and I've been living most of my life in the Middle East. However, from what I've been reading, from what I've been researching on my own, I do realize that from my perspective.
Nora, let me interrupt you for a second. We've got some kind of a crackling on your mic.
That was my pendant. Sorry, I always do that. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. That's maybe the first thing that I would like to focus on, that besides everything that Bill very well said, I find it a little bit interesting how, the West or Europe in specific talks about democracy and how democracy works and all of that. But then when it comes to the real thing, you see that actually democracy is not applied, because now you're seeing that, after the people have spoken, and, it's not about agreeing or disagreeing. It's about the people. If the majority wants out, then that's democracy. And seeing that they want to try again until they get the vote that they want, this already in itself should be a question mark for everyone. People have to question that. It's not about everything else. That's the first thing people should question, in my humble opinion. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd like to say is that obviously on an economical point of view, since Europe, and again I might be wrong, just please anyone jump in if you have any other opinion on that. But it seems to me, from what I remember, that Europe, when everyone had their own, legislations, their own laws, they were economically independent, things were okay. I mean, I'm not saying that people were living a lavish life, but everyone was okay. I remember when I was living in Italy, and people could afford things. And since the European Union, people have been struggling so much. And obviously, I don't know about how it is in the UK, but from what I hear, it's been very difficult. And in Italy, you see a lot of people, they don't have jobs. It's very difficult to find work. Salaries are very low. A lot of people are just impoverished. So I don't see the logic behind the EU, in my opinion, although it does affect me positively in the sense that I have freedom of movement, and there are positive things out of it. But we do have to look at the bigger perspective, I think, and the well-being of the whole, not only focus on my personal needs if I have something that's positive for me. This is kind of what I have. Of course, there's so much more to talk about, but this is kind of what I want to put in on the table for now. Thank you.
Nora, that's a really good perspective. What I'd like to add to it is, to be honest, I'm really quite shocked, although I don't shock easily, so that might be an overstatement, at the effect of this vote on the British people. I'm sure you've all seen a lot of examples of that on social media. Yes. Where there is so much dissension and conflict now in the UK because of the result of the vote. And, it is a very complex subject. The kind of impression I've got is that a lot of the Brexit people are now saying that they voted out more as a a vote of no confidence, if you like, in the political leadership, and are now, so it's being reported, having second thoughts about this. The other issue that's come out as well is that there was some misinformation given by the people who were supporting the leave position. And that again has complicated it, because it's kind of given a justification to those that wanted to stay to actually petition for a new referendum based on political misinformation that was given during the campaign. The media is positioning it, as far as I know, as being the primary issue of immigration, but I think that's vastly oversimplifying things, because, you know, so much more is being said now about the effect of the exit on the stock market, on the exchange rate, and we've experienced that ourselves personally. So it's not a simple question at all. And, you know, my kind of radar for some dirty work at the crossroads, as we say, went on the alert immediately when this immigration thing became the major issue, because, of course, this has been going on for some time. It was the source of the Paris attack where people were killed. It's been which was a false flag. It's been given the cause for multiple other false flags and killings and racial conflict and everything else. So it's very interesting to me that it should have been put as the primary issue in relation to Brexit as well, which is vastly oversimplifying things. I'm sure we can talk about that at some point as well. The only other thing I wanted to add to this was that, it's interesting that the turnout for this vote was much, much higher than in a general election, and the level of conflict between the two sides is much, much higher than when a general election result is called, which again is an interesting point. But the other thing is that, you know, Britain, UK, whatever, never fully bought into the EU because they never bought into the euro. And they maintain their independence in terms of the currency. True. So really there was never that 100% commitment to being in Europe. It was very much a foot in both camps. So I'm not drawing any particular conclusions here. I'm just kind of throwing up some of the facets of this story. And I've seen a couple of other things as well. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with Christopher Everard, who I only came across recently, who did a really excellent video about the history of the EU and the fact that it originated out of the Nazis. Yes. As we know, many other things have done. And, of course, Germany has been...
Jan, let me interrupt you here, because can you go into that? I mean, the history of it, because...
This was one of my questions.
Yeah, can you just sort of stop there and just set the stage as to how it all started up to begin with?
Yeah, I don't claim to be able to explain it in the same way that Christopher did in his video. And I think his website is Christopher Everard, everard.co.uk. But he basically goes back to the history of the royal family in England, in Britain, and the fact that Prince Philip, his whole family was connected with the Nazis, and his sisters married into members of the SS, and how his family history, as far as England is concerned, the UK is concerned, has been really kind of airbrushed out. And of course there is so much, I'm not sure evidence is the right word, so much information out there about the royal family being involved with the cabal. And so the EU, which was established after the Second World War, became the next stage in the creation of the New World Order in terms of, you know, globalization and so on. And of course, Germany has been a very, very dominant member of the EU. We all know Germany is thriving and really dominates the votes and the vetoes and everything else. And that kind of ties in with this whole theory, if you like, that it's part of this Nazi Khazarian mafia regime.
And Merkel is also tied directly to Adolf Hitler.
Yes.
Merkel, you're talking about the Chancellor of Germany?
Yeah,
Yes.
the Chancellor,
Yeah.
Angela
Okay.
Merkel.
Angela Merkel. Okay.
Yeah.
How so, Bill? Oh, she was part of the youth movement, but she claims that she just did that because it was the thing to do or something.
Don't they all?
Yeah, well, of course, George Soros and the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Morgans all think they're doing the right thing too. Every day that they fatten their bank account at the expense of the rest of us.
Well, they are doing the right thing if you want to consider the fact that the reality they've created is working perfectly. We're all being impoverished and kept stupid. So it works. They are doing the right thing for what they want. The problem is we don't want what they want.
Yeah, and I think, this is something I tell everybody that I talk to. I get a lot of people that go right up against this and say, how can you look at something this way or the other? But you know something? Anybody that's listening to this radio show, anybody, I would say that just as I say to everyone, don't look at what any one person says, do the investigation. And of course, Nancy, you are probably a world-class investigator, obviously, with 9/11 and the Kennedy thing. But I tell them, investigate these things. But rather than saying, look at, Britain's exit or whether Obama should be tried for treason or anything else, I say, why don't you investigate the UN Agenda 21 and investigate the Georgia Stones, where it is written that they want to depopulate the world down to 500 million people. I said, once you understand at the top of the agenda where they're going with this, then it gets a little easier to look at it and say, okay, we have something like Britain's exit, and how do we look at all of the stories out there and weigh up and investigate and find out what's really true? As I said, not to get off the topic, but you are a champion investigator. I've looked at 9/11. I know exactly there is no possible way that was an outside job. And I was there the day Kennedy was killed. And I know for a fact that that was with an agenda, just as you found out. So, it's digging down to find what are they actually trying to accomplish here. Was this the good guys, actually making some progress to unravel it? Or was it an agenda that Jan talked about? There's a lot of conflict coming up in this. And I think it's no secret that they're doing the same thing in the U.S. I mean, right now we're tiptoeing the very fine line of an actual all-out civil war over here. So, it's digging into it and saying, how do we push this into the good side if it's not already, or if it is, how do we get everybody calmed down on it?
Well, Ben Fulford had an interesting take on the whole, well, he always has an interesting take on it. But, from his standpoint, it is an unraveling of, it doesn't even matter at this point whether it's the dark side or the light side. It can't work. The system is unraveling. It just doesn't work. So nobody is going to be able to stop it. And he talks in terms of the White Dragon Society and what they're trying to do. And then he talks about the Rockefellers, and he said that the Rothschilds actually made billions, maybe trillions of dollars. And supposedly they made more on the pound situation when this happened, that the money went crazy, that they made so much money, they had actually made more money than they made at Waterloo, which was a situation where the Rothschilds knew that Napoleon had been defeated, but they told the British people that, in fact, it was the other way around. And because of that, and because of the crash of everything happening around them, they were able to basically start up the Bank of England and everything else. So this was a very big money maker. And when you look at the money that they made, you have to go, was this just another scam to make money? I mean, because we don't know at what levels all of this is happening. Simon Parks he was on his last show on Wolf Spirit. He was asked about the potential of the election being a fraud or not, and he said, "Look when Scotland was going through I guess of leaving the United Kingdom. I'm not even sure what they were protesting.
Yeah, they were voting for independence."
Right, and those in that election, they had situations where trucks. Now, this is Simon Parks, and I hope I've got him right. I mean, again, forgive us if we make any mistakes, because we're just trying to do the best with what knowledge we have on the top of our heads. We're just friends having a discussion here. So, what Simon said was that at that time there would be trucks that would come up to the voting poll to take the votes and count them, and the trucks would disappear. That they lost whole sections of votes because the trucks that picked them up were not the official trucks.
That's interesting. I actually worked when I was much, much younger, and I don't know if the system's changed, but when I actually worked in one of the polling stations in the UK, as a vote counter. And this was something that was raised about, has this vote been scammed, basically? And the response seemed to be that the system was the same, and that is that the votes are counted actually in situ in the polling stations. So the actual vote slips, and it's all manual, of course, it's not computerized like it is over here. So you've got literally independent volunteers, unless they are infiltrators, actually counting the votes manually. And if I remember rightly, there's also a verification process for the vote count as well. So I think it's much less likely to have been rigged than a computerized system, which, we've got lots of people coming out, well, not lots, but people coming out in the US saying they actually were coders who put in a system to rig the results. So, in that case, the trucks would arrive or the votes would be taken away after they've been counted, not before. Now, I don't know whether that was the same process in Scotland for the independence vote, but I think they tend to use the same system across the country.
Well, that's what Simon said, so maybe it's not true, but I found that it wasn't it 52% to 48? Wasn't that what?
Yeah, even a 51 point something to, yeah.
Wow, and I wondered.
Borderline.
Yeah, I wondered because of what Simon had said, if there wasn't actually much more that were voting, to exit than actually came up in the tally. It's one of those situations we'll never know. But the fact that it was virtually a 50-50 thing, that puts you in and with a large turnout, that puts you into a situation of really kind of splitting the population.
And I'm surprised at that closer result. They didn't go for a recount, actually.
Yeah, you would think so.
Yeah. And maybe that's why there's this petition now to actually repeat the referendum.
Does it look like that may turn into something?
Well, they've had quite a lot of votes already, and it's a bit like the petitions to the White House. When it reaches a certain number, it has to be considered, and it's way over the required number. I think the number was 10,000, and they're up in. Last time I saw it was up to nearly 50,000. So, it has to be under consideration. But again, that in a way that's creating more conflict. With the Brexit people saying, well, why should we have another referendum? You ought to accept the result, and that's the end of it.
Well, Fulford also indicated that, that the British going out, is probably going to result in the French going out. And that it's going to, act like a domino effect. Mm-hmm. So if all of a sudden they're putting the whammy on everything by requiring another referendum, that makes it like very interesting because everything's on hold. Because if the people are in the process of really kind of awakening and saying, look this isn't working for us, and the Brits have had the courage to be able to say it's not working, let's quit. We've got to follow the Brits. We've got to get out of this thing. But now the Brits are boom. So we might be having this conversation for 3 or 4, 5, 6 months from now. The same situation not resolved.
Yeah, and I think we need to recognise that there are two factions here, if you like, in this whole post-vote debate, because we've got the faction that is completely the sheeple, and I hate that word because it's very disrespectful to people. They've been deliberately brainwashed. But we've got people who are completely unawakened, who take in everything that the mass media says, and who believe that the whole thing is about immigration, which is very naive if you understand the complexities of this. And then you've got the people that voted who actually are awake, who understand the bigger picture agenda, who are familiar with the Christopher Everards, who look at the alternative media, who, perhaps follow David Icke and so on. And they're voting with a whole different mindset and information base than the people who are just relying on the politicians and the media. So that in itself is, again, almost creating a subset of conflict between those people that are saying it's simple and you made the wrong decision because you're racist and everything else, versus those that are saying this is about, political domination, it's about economic manipulation, it's about globalization, it's about the New World Order, and that the flood of immigrants was a deliberate ploy to create these kinds of situations, because there have been immigrants in the UK for years. I mean, the biggest influx of immigrants was from India and Pakistan back when I was young, in the kind of late 50s and 60s. And to be honest, they were filling positions that there weren't British people to fill. And then we started with, when after the breakup of the USSR, quite a number of Eastern Europeans then started coming into Britain. So this is nothing new, but of course the whole thing about the Muslim situation and ISIS has been blown up to deliberately create this separation and this conflict. And of course Trump is doing the same thing over here, making, immigration a major issue. But this has been really inflamed by the media and is distorting the whole picture of the EU and its real function completely.
Well, what do you think that is, the function of the EU? Why did they set it up to begin with? I mean, it was probably set up for the New World Order and the ability to organize and control. But what has it been doing? Is that how was it set up that we know that Germany seems to be the major player, but that's the only thing I know.
And France was a pretty strong player. I mean, the French won't take any shit, I mean, they protest about everything. And in fact, one of the latest things, I think that might have even been in Benjamin Fulfer's report, about the fact that the French authorities now can't cope with the level of demonstrations that are going on. The farmers have always been very militant about the agricultural policy and things like that. I mean, if you look at it from the point of view of the trading position, I think and again, if this is mistaken in any way, don't hold me accountable, but my impression is that it was a bit like, the United States is a major, major power and a very large entity. And uniting Europe was a bit like creating another United States, but with united countries in Europe, to actually create a trading base and to make it easier to actually trade on an economic level. And of course, then they introduced the euro, which was meant to kind of stabilize across the different nations the whole trade, base for trading in currency. And it also, as I say, as Nora was saying earlier, it opened up the borders so that anybody within the EU could work and live in any country without having to go through an immigration process. So I think that the issue that arose, and this is something that came up in a video I shared, which was by somebody called Mark Blythe, who is, and I'm having to look at my Facebook post to remember, Professor of Political Economy at Brown University. He was talking about the fact that the EU has actually by stealth become a political organisation. And, it makes policy without it really being done on a democratic basis. So it started out as it was the economic union. And that was the point of the original concept. But it then became a political union, which I think is one of the reasons why the Brits objected, because they seemed to make policy without any real reference to a democratic process.
Now, where was this policy being set up? How was that?
Sorry?
Yeah, okay, who took over the power? I mean, if there's we got Washington, D.C., and we've got the Senate and the House and all of that is, the leadership, the corporate leadership of the United States. But over there, was it Germany? I mean, how was it set up that you get a governing body out of it without anybody having much of a say? What was that governing body?
Let me answer that one. Nancy, I think that, first off, what Jan was saying is the concept or the way it was sold for the EU. But I personally think, in my humble opinion, from my experience of digging, the whole purpose of putting the EU together was to weaken the United States. Because if you take it back to, let's just for the sake of discussion, call it the Nazis. They, on paper, lost World War II, just like Japan lost it on paper. But they've come out pretty damn good if you look at Germany, and so has Japan in the long run. But those powers that wanted that concept, that we'll call it the New World Order, but that wanted that concept of control, be it the Rothschilds or any name you put with it, they came up against the fact that after D-Day, it was very obvious the United States was too strong to control. So it was my understanding from a lot of the research I did that the purpose of the EU was to sell it on the same concept they sold the North American Union, trying to get Canada and Mexico and the U.S. all into one thing so that they could put those four quadrants of the world together. Once all four were in place, that they could put those four quadrants together and then say, bingo, we've got it. We control the whole world. The point of weakening the U.S. with the EU did work to some degree, but obviously they had to come in and, do some puppet work over here that we're starting to see now, but they've got the U.S. divided in half, arguing and bickering over everything, whether it be race, religion, money, politics, sex, whatever. To me, that EU situation, that's why I say that I look at it from a positive, hopeful side, that this may become the unraveling, because every time something like this comes up, yes, it is to their advantage if there's conflict and argument, and the more we fuss and fight, the less attention we can pay to what's going on. Example, the British thing was such a high point in the news on the British exit that Monsanto went in and made a secret deal with the U.S. Senate to get GMO labeling off of the next 2 years, where there would be no GMO labeling allowed. we're going to see how that comes out, because of course now things are coming to light so much faster. And I think this is going to happen for your listeners as well. I think they're going to see this British exit start showing a lot of things very rapidly. You know, it took a long, long time to figure out what happened with John Kennedy. It took quite a long time. It took over a decade to find out 9/11 was an inside job. On this, if you notice and look back, when the Orlando shooting happened, within a week, they captured the second guy involved out in California, and he sang like a songbird that the whole thing was a CIA setup. And he went through every detail of it where there was absolutely no doubt, and the FBI stepped right in and said, shh, everybody quiet, we don't want to talk about this. So when people are starting to see things happen that fast, this may be what's going on over there right now with this bringing about another referendum and everything else. It may be on the left hand or the right hand, whichever way you want to look at it, may be creating a lot of conflict, and to the advantage of those powers that be that want the power over in Brussels and to continue that total control domination. But on the other hand, the whole thing does bring a lot of exposure really fast.
So maybe have them having a second referendum, the vote would go even more towards exiting. That's what you would hope. That, well, now I really know why I want to exit, and now this time we're going to do it again. Because, and like you say, everything is blowing up in their face. Everything they try seems to blow up and just kind of accelerate the awakening.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, the other thing that's good about it is even if the UK voted to go back in, it doesn't necessarily mean that France and Italy and other countries won't say, well, I don't care what the UK did, we're getting out. The other thing is it's a catalyst that gives a lot of people sitting on the fence courage. And from a U.S. perspective, the very next day, I saw the internet starting to light up with get the United States out of the UN and get the UN out of America. And I think that baby's coming, and that'll be the best thing probably that ever happened to the U.S.
I'd like to come in just to make a comment in regards to what you all said. The thing is, I think it is so obvious, I mean, this whole thing about the referendum, because it has been said before by different people, such as, for example, the president of the EU Commission, what's his name? Juncker, I think. I don't remember his name. He stated this. He said that if the vote is yes, then we proceed. You know, yes in the sense that we remain. If no, then we continue until we get the answer that we want. He said that. You hear this from other people as well, like another, what was he, the Belgian Prime Minister. He said the same thing. I mean, there are different people, they're saying it out loud that we are not going to stop until we get the vote that we are satisfied with. So I don't understand how people don't see that. So as you said, it has become Europe, the EU has become a political thing. It's not about economy anymore. They make the laws. There's no democracy, and that should be a red flag in itself. I mean,
yes,
people should see that.
Absolutely, Nora. And I mean, just to follow on from Nancy's question, I mean, that's why it's now the European Parliament. Yeah. And there was a speech that was given by Nigel Farage.
Yes,
Farage.
Oh yeah, I saw that one.
And I just pulled that up actually on my PC, and he said the biggest problem you've got, and the main reason the UK voted the way it did, and this was to the European Parliament, by the way, is because you have, by stealth and deception and without telling the truth to the rest of the peoples of Europe, you have imposed upon them a political union. When the people in 2005 in the Netherlands and France voted against that political union and rejected the constitution, you simply ignored them and brought the Lisbon Treaty in through the back door. And I think there have been, without being an expert on this, there have been multiple examples of, policies being railroaded through by those with most power to to sway things, going back to Germany and as I said, even France to an extent. And of course the parliament itself is in Brussels. So, it has transitioned very cleverly from let's get together and do trade to now we can take over and we've established this entity that people have bought into. Now we can move our agenda forward, and that's the way that they tend to work, is it not?
Indeed.
Let me, Nora, you got something?
No, it was just
I'm just curious as to why these people are either very stupid or something else at work. Why did the economy go down because of bad policy? I mean, in the Soviet Union, the real problem with the Soviet Union is the concept that it was being controlled from the top economically. So they decide, well, we need 400 tractors, therefore we need X number of tires, therefore we need X amount of rubber to make the tires. So it was this 5-year planning thing that, of course, you cannot plan from the top because you make all these tractors and nobody needs them. So was it that kind of a thing that trying to control the economy was really mucking up the economy? Or do you think that it was also a design to bring down the economy?
I think it's an impact that varies according to the country involved. It's what Nora was saying about, the fact that there are a couple of key countries in the EU that are doing fine, thank you very much. And this is where I would really recommend looking at this video that has Mark Blythe talking about the economic side of things. Because, by establishing the euro, you basically, as a country within the euro, given away your ability to manage your economy and your currency independently of other people. So, obviously controlling exchange rates and so on is, I'm no economic expert by any means, but obviously, currency is one of the things that is part of the economic policy. And of course, when you're in this mass EU with one currency, then you are subject to whatever the controlling Parliament decides in relation to that currency, whether it's good for you or not. And that's the problem, that with that currency, that power to control was given away. Now, interestingly, and I can't remember when it happened, but the pound used to be controlled by the government, and they gave away that power to the Bank of England because they positioned it that then it wouldn't be subject to political influence, it would be independent, which I thought at the time was, that's a pretty good idea. And then when you realise that the banksters are behind so much of the economic manipulation, it's like, shoving the chicken or the fox into the hen house, isn't it? So, Britain has maintained that element of, apparent element of independence from the euro, but of course the fact that the Bank of England is part of, this whole cabal organisation is makes it something of a fiction, I think.
Yeah, and the other thing I would just add to that, Nancy, right quick, is, I hope more people wake up to the fact of actually looking at how that control works. And I'm going to use an example totally unrelated, but it has the same exact concept. When Nora was talking about that it has not worked well for Italy, and you look at how well it has worked for Germany or somewhere else, if you look at it, the people who are doing well are the ones who had a lot of money to begin with. Even the politicians, you look at our Congress, you sit and go, how do you get so many millionaires when they don't do anything or never did anything or never owned a business? And those people that are making that policy, that are squeezing a country like Italy and then fattening another country, be it Germany or wherever, they usually have money. And the example I was going to give is if the American people were to wake up and look at the issue that's going on with gun control right now, trying to take away our Second Amendment right to protect ourselves from an out-of-control government, all of those people who are screaming gun control, and the higher-ups and trying to push through that are all surrounded by armed guards or carry weapons themselves. And you sit there and you look at it and you say, now, wait a minute. This is a bit of an irony. It's not actually an irony. It's a hypocrisy, because they say, oh, well, we're fat. You know, we're fat cats. We got a lot of money. But if we just get our claws into a little more, we'll be even better off when they're already doing very well. Same way with the gun control. They don't need guns because, of course, they don't need them because they have armed guards around them all the time. But they can take them from us, and then they can take our power. You know, to me, the economy is just as hot as the guns. You know, they're both a weapon when it gets to people. You take money away from people and you put them into poverty, you've got them pretty well under your thumb until the uprising comes, and that's probably what we're seeing now with that British exit, is a bit of the uprising starting to come into play.
Well, I definitely think that the Second Amendment is not so much a right as a something that you have to do as an American citizen. It's a responsibility to have a gun, because with a gun, the only reason that America is still semi-okay freedom-wise is because we got the guns. You take those guns away, and we've got no power anymore.
Yeah, and look at the crime rate in Switzerland, where they require everyone to own a gun, and then look at the crime rate in Chicago with the tightest gun control laws in America. You can see the agenda from the gun perspective just looking at Chicago in the U.S. and saying, you know, that city is totally under control and it's out of control. Same way with economic policy. I don't blame the British for jumping out of the EU. I just said, you know, as I told one of the people this very morning, I said to them, if we can use the British exit as a stepping stone to get out of the UN and get the UN out of the US and get the corruption out of the banks and get the corruption out of the politics and get the TPP taken apart, which is horribly devastating to the American people, that, you know, that could be that first little thread that snapped on the vest or what have you and started unraveling. And I personally hope it is. I mean, I don't want to see anyone suffer, but I would rather see a little bit of turmoil and suffering in the interim to come out really with everybody in a good position and in control of their life, in control of their freedom. Because Nora just moved back to Italy, and Jan has been over here now roughly 6 or 7 years in the U.S. In the 6 or 7 years even, not a lifetime you and I have shared, she has seen the U.S. shift to a very totalitarian military police state very, very, very rapidly. And that goes right back to the economic control, because the gun issue didn't come up when they took away our economic control, putting the Federal Reserve Bank in 1913. So, you know, that hopefully is the next thing to unravel too.
I think the very positive thing about this is that I do believe, as we've been each of us saying in our own way, that this is part of the awakening and part of the collapse of this regime, because, you know, a lot of the reports again have been saying that people voted no to as a protest against the politicians and the banksters. And, you know, particularly when there was this whole scandal over David Cameron and his naming in the Panama Papers about, you know, his offshore assets while, you know, imposing austerity on the British people. And they are just getting really fed up with this hypocrisy and, you know, this one rule for the rich and another for the poor, that people are saying no. And that's brilliant, because, the more that people recognise that and start to challenge the status quo and the media and everything else and say, I'm saying no to this, then, the more that this change will accelerate.
Yeah, and it's not about, at the bottom, as I know, I feel the energy from Nora, that she, you, Nancy, and all would agree that at the end of the day, yes, there's economics and there's all kinds of things at issue, and there's rich and there's poor, and there's a lot of issues here. But if the global community, if the planet, if this Mother Gaia is waking up from the ground up, as it were, let's say, to the reality, at the end of the day, it is down to human beings treating human beings like human beings. And that is not what was happening under the EU. It's not what's happening currently in the US. And it's not becoming one human family. And I had somebody tell me the other day saying, oh, yeah, we're always going to have, people against other people and everything else. And I said, no, that's not necessarily true. I have a saying, we're all one family. We all need to look out for the welfare of each other, but it doesn't mean we all have to be in the same room at the same time. If our energy doesn't get along with someone else's energy, we don't have to make them our best friend. But it doesn't mean we can't treat people like human beings. And it doesn't help anyone by hoarding the things. And I don't believe in a welfare state, and I don't believe in anything but you work hard and you can do maybe better than the next guy a little bit, but it doesn't mean you step on their head to get where you want to go. And unfortunately, I think the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Soros and the European Union and certainly the American Washington, D.C. clan up there have just turned into a bunch of gangsters. And, gangsters don't mind stepping on people's heads. But that global awakening hopefully will breathe the light and bring that to an end, as Jan said.
Absolutely. Just like Nancy always says, when you say that, but people always have conflicts, that's a contract you're making. You are agreeing to this reality. You don't have to. You can shift your beliefs, and it's doable. And I've seen it myself when I decided to think. Till now I do that mistake, but every time I think of something like that, I shift back and I say, no, I can change the contract. I can change my belief, and it's possible. If every person does that, then the world can definitely start shifting in a more positive reality.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the contract thing is so true. Yeah, the contract thing is so true, because everything we say has an impact. And just one last thing I'd like to say, because I think we're at the top of the hour, regarding the whole union thing. The ironic part that I always think about is that why do we need a binding union between countries when a union can be set without that contract? Just like, for example, if we can see Switzerland or Iceland. These are independent countries. They're still doing businesses. They're still doing treaties with Europe or other countries, but they're independent. Why don't we take them as an example? So this is all, it can be done. So this shows us how, unfortunately, the human collective works, that you need to dominate or feel that you have this binding contract where another person cannot just say, listen, right now I don't want to, I don't agree on this, and the other person, just accepts it and says, okay, we don't have to agree on this. You don't have to force people to do things. So it's about, to me, this unity is not a real unity, it's just to control.
I agree completely. I think that's absolutely right. And it's the result of brainwashing, let's face it. The people who are so hysterical about leaving the EU have been brainwashed into thinking that Britain can only, be successful economically by being within the Union, which is complete bullshit. So,
for God's sake, I read they were giving away 300 million or 350 million pounds a week. Why don't you just keep that money for yourself? Keep it for your people. Why are you giving it to the European Union? And at the end, even businesses, they don't have any sort of legal rights. They have to always go back to the laws of the EU. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Okay,
and Nora,
let me break here because we are at the top of the hour, and when we come back, I do want to let's mention Iceland, because Iceland is much more than just an independent state. They may be the key to everything.
Nancy, I know you wanted to go on to Iceland. Before we do that, could I just throw something into the mix here?
Sure.
Obviously, Benjamin Fulford and others are saying that the cabal is, collapsing, and that a lot of what's going on is something of a panic to try and maintain control. And one of the things that really confused me on a logical level was really the different ways that you could look at this whole Brexit thing. Because you've got this question of the exorbitant amount of money that Soros and the like made from the vote to leave the EU. So you've got, I'll make as much money as I can, leverage that decision, which suggests that they knew in advance that that was going to be the result. You've then got, the concept of the EU as being part of the globalization New World Order strategy, which, if it was going to be rigged, would have kept Britain in the EU rather than out of it to maintain that organisation. And then you've got this whole thing about the immigration to create this conflict, which, is part of the agenda to create this third world war, or at least to create these various civil wars in different countries. So, you've got the Trumpism that is creating this racial tension. You've got what's happening in Europe with this flood of Muslim refugees and immigrants in. So in effect, it seems like it's a bit like this kind of desperate attempt to create as many options to get the outcome that they want, some of which are actually working against each other. I don't know if you've got anything that you'd like to throw into that.
Well, I think it's because that they're falling apart, that they actually have different agendas.
yeah, Nancy,
It's got the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers are pulling apart. I don't know what the different groups are, but according to Fulford, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds have never been in bed together. They simply have been working the same scheme.
Yeah.
So now it's like rats deserting the ship. And I think that may possibly be why the Rothschilds, hey, listen, there's a lot of really good psychics out there. It could have been a planned thing that they would lose and everything would go on and, da-da-da. And then, no, it wasn't, but the Rothschilds had the better psychic and saw that and took a chance on the money.
Yeah, that's very true, Nancy. And, I was just going to say that people hedge their bets and what have you, because, this is one of the things that the media and the distortion has had. And, because I was in commercial real estate, I followed Donald Trump from very early days of my, understanding of him. And I at first had one opinion of him because of the fact that, he's, not that big a deal because he did it on daddy's money. But as I watched him over the years, there's a classic example. Obama is actually creating the biggest racial division in American history. And at the same time, and by the way, Martin Luther King's probably spinning in his grave on that one. But, on the other hand, Donald Trump is actually being distorted by the media. He hires minorities. He hires Democrats, Republicans, independents. He's involved in all kinds of things that, are across the board. But yet again, the media is making his issues about the fact, let's do immigration legally. Let's not let the illegals in. Let's get the ones who are here that are legally, rightfully able to be immigrants to America through the proper process and get it out. But they're using that as a divisive thing to distract from the fact that Obama's bringing in people who are actually dangerous and are committing crimes and what have you. And Hillary has an agenda even 10 times the size of Obama's. So again, this goes back to people doing their homework, doing their research, and not getting caught up in the fact that, oh, well, so-and-so's a Republican or so-and-so's a Democrat, or, you know, the media says that, that Trump's a racist or what have you, because, you know, that is the exact agenda they want us all to fall in the trap of, is to say, oh, you know, well, so-and-so's, you know, not good. And then they can get the person in that can ship people off to the FEMA camps or whatever the agenda is de jour. And, I think that that's one of our big problems, that people have got to stop looking at things on the surface and start saying, A, I'm going to dig a little further, and B, I'm going to sit quietly with this divine quantum universe that gives me everything I need to know. And as Nora said, I can change my own belief systems, but if we get in touch with that and say, what really feels right? I've done enough research to see both sides of the story, and instead of just getting all hot-headed and running out and saying, oh, well, this guy's bad or that guy's bad or this girl's bad or whatever, saying what feels right for me. And in a sense, I have just in my 14 years experience, I didn't grow up there like Jan did. I think the British people actually did that. I think in the vote, they actually said, we can smell a rat. We don't like what's being done to us. And, you know, they just said, this is what feels right to do. And maybe it was roughly 50-50. But if the other 50% would actually stop reacting and start digging and start looking, I'll bet you it would have went 75 or 80%.
Yeah. Could I jump in here? And it's before we talk about Iceland. Sorry, Nancy, but because it's so appropriate.
No, just go with it.
Yeah. What I'm going to say is going to sound a little irrelevant, but you know, everything is connected. For me, because I don't know, Bill and Jan, you don't know. I'm half Saudi Arabian. My father is from Saudi Arabia, and I've lived most of my life in Saudi. So. I see a very clear connection between this whole immigration thing, which is a key to what the manipulation and what's happening. Islam, in a way, is kind of a tool used to, you know, brainwash people and get them to hate, you know, Islam or things like that. But we need to go back to the origins, and I can see it very clearly. Long ago, even until the 80s, people in Saudi Arabia were very relaxed. Things, I mean, okay, you know, you have Islam, you have certain belief systems and all that, but people were very relaxed. There weren't all these restrictions. Even on TV, for example, something very, very dumb, which is music. They used to put music videos on TV, something that after the Gulf War was prohibited. Now, this is where we kind of bring in, the United States government. And remember, Nancy, we were talking about this with my friend Nora on the other show, and the line got cut off.
Right.
The thing is, in my belief, is that things changed drastically after the Gulf War. They suddenly all these religious police kind of people started having power. These religious police they're not policemen, but they're these bearded guys with which a lot of them are convicts, actually, by the way. They go in the streets and control people and tell them what to do and catch people and things like that. So they're tyrants practically. And this happened after the Gulf War, not before. They were non-existent before. I noticed that the shift of how people view Islam and how extremism has unfolded was after the Gulf War. So in my opinion, I see a very clear idea that there are Muslims, let's say, who are corrupt, who say they're complete hypocrites. They say, oh, we hate the West. Oh, the West are all infidels. But they are actually working along covertly with the West, not the people, but these governments that are completely corrupt and have their own agenda. So and obviously we know that unfortunately the Muslim Brotherhood is also closely knit with the British government as well. So when I see this, I see a very clear pattern where the Muslim people and even the non-Muslims in the West or wherever are being put against each other. It's besides the point what your belief system is and what your value-based system is. It's just they are putting these people against each other so that then they can control. But it's coming from the governments and it's coming from these Muslim heads who claim to the people that they are for Islam and all that, but covertly they are big hypocrites and they just use Islam in a very extremist way to control the people. This is how I see it, and hence everything that's happening right now.
You're absolutely right, Nora. The whole thing's being paid for by the United States government.
Yeah.
The whole thing. And you're probably right, the Iraq War was probably about the right starting point for it. It actually, started when the U.S. got corrupt enough to blow up its own buildings in New York on 9/11. And then it was just another tool. It's kind of like what Nancy and I were talking about earlier about the gun control. Money, guns, corrupting something like a religion, for example, like that. What better way to control people? And those are the people that we've got to get out of the picture, get them moved out, and some people who really have the good of the people at heart moved in. And that's why I said I'm hoping this is the beginning of the unraveling, and we start seeing those bad guys losing their positions.
Yes, absolutely. Even on a prophetic level, what the Prophet Muhammad said. I know people say I'm not a religious person. I'm just saying what I've read and what I feel. As you well said, Bill, it's all about how you feel. People say that he was a pedophile. He was this is all just hating each other and hurting each other and just aggravating people. But I read it and I was shocked that he himself said that part of his prophecy was that one day Islam, and he wasn't saying this because, he's an advocate in the sense that, Islam is the best religion, all this bullshit. It's not about that. But that it would be used, and the ones who are going to use the religion as a control are the Muslims themselves, are these people in power who are hypocrites. He said that. And this was 1,400 years ago. And this is what's unfolding right now. And even in that time, he spoke about ISIS. Not as in the name ISIS, but he spoke about these people who are not believers. They have nothing to do with spirituality, and they would have this black flag. It's all spoken about 1,400 years ago. So it's shocking when you see it unfold. So there is a reality to it.
Yeah, and I think the same goes for the Catholic Church as well. We've seen so many examples of these religions actually preaching one thing and actually doing another. I just wanted to pick up on what you said, Nora, about, the Gulf War, because it did bring back to mind the fact that, and it comes back to the EU again. Britain has never really been working in alignment with the EU, because if you look at the Gulf War, that was a collaboration in effect between Britain and the US. And when it came to post 9/11 and the Iraq War, again, it was Tony Blair and Bush who manipulated evidence to justify making war. And that went completely against what the EU were wanting to do in terms of the 9/11 situation. So there's definitely been this collusion between Britain and the US. And again, I didn't realize until I was reading some of the reports, but the reason for Obama's visit in April was to try to rally support with David Cameron for staying in the EU. And I think he really annoyed some Brits by saying that if Britain didn't stay in the EU, they'd be at the back of the queue for doing trade with America, which didn't go down at all well.
Wow.
Yeah, Nora, since you're not over in the United States, I will tell you, I would bet my life right now on the fact that our beloved president, who was elected because he was a black man, and there are a lot of good black leaders, Martin Luther King and many others, but like everything else, there's good ones and there's bad ones. I can assure you that you're, by your picture, you're much younger than I am, but I would bet my life on the fact that this gentleman that's in our White House right now, and I use the term gentleman loosely, will probably go down in history as the worst president the United States has ever had.
Even worse than Bush.
Yeah, I'm afraid that when it comes to puppets, he and Hillary have just about proven to be the best puppets to the money people in the world and that dark side that there is. But we've got a lot of good people out there too, trying to do better. And you know, regardless of how America goes on this, which it looks like it's going to end up being between Trump and Hillary, unless the FBI can put Hillary in jail first. You know, that's a classic example. We can hope that people don't buy into the propaganda coming out, and that the real story, that the real people who know Donald Trump, if he is put in the White House, they know he will hire across party lines, he'll hire across races, religions. I mean, he's the kind of guy that probably put a Muslim in there to do as an advisor to figure out, you know, the best way to get rid of what the CIA and the government created in dividing this Muslim religion together. And, you know, if it hadn't have been for whoever, I mean, I'm not taking sides with any religion, but if it hadn't been the Muslims, it'd have been the Catholic Church. If it hadn't have been the Catholics, it'd have been the Methodists. You know, that's just the way these people work. And that's where the world is waking up now. And, I think it's really lovely to hear you step up and say, as you did in the early part of the show, that, you know, that Italy has suffered under the EU, because when all the water's boiled out of the pot, and I'm pretty sure Nancy would agree with me on this one, it does get down to that 1%, or if you want to call it the 1%, that are controlling the world for an agenda that is not on the behalf of the other 99%. It's for their own little purpose, and then they have no empathy, sympathy, compassion, and in most cases, a tremendous amount of them are psychopaths.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Yeah, very well put, Bill. Thank you. Do you want to, absolutely. Do you want to shift to Iceland, Nancy?
Well, I'm just sitting here and I've got so many things going through my head, but, you know, first off, Thomas Jefferson stated, well, first off, the American Revolution was a revolution based on the fact that the Bank of England was trying to control the colonies. It was not because of a tax on tea. It was because the Bank of England was the only money that they could possibly use, because the Parliament had decided that the colonies could not print their own money. So they were forced to use this English money, and there wasn't enough of it. So it wasn't that they had to pay a tax on tea. It was how they had to pay the tax on tea. They didn't have the money. And the colonies were going into a complete economic crash because they couldn't produce their own money, their own agreements between people as to what would represent a fair exchange. So from the beginning of America, it was based on the fact that they went to war with a bank. Now, Thomas Jefferson said, I much more fear a bank, the financial institutions, than a standing army. This is not an unknown situation, how financial institutions can gain control. In America after the Civil War, now I have to go back to the Civil War and thinking about the British exit, because the Brits said, no, we don't want to play this union game. Goodbye. Okay? Now, in America, a whole bunch of states in the 1860s says, we don't want to play this union. Goodbye. And the reaction was that, no, you have to. No, you have to stay. And we want you to stay so badly that we are going to go to war with you. Okay? And more people died in that battle. The South was devastated economically, but so wasn't the North. That entire situation was orchestrated by the international bankers. Because at the end of the war, the country was so depleted that the bankers said, well, listen, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll give you some money here to be able to build yourself back up, but we want the District of Columbia. So the 10 square miles of the District of Columbia then became the home base of the international bankers. Being there, and being that all of the agencies of the United States government were there, they simply, over a period of the next many decades, took the corporation and put it on top of the various departments of what was a republic government. So now you have, the State Department is actually a branch of the corporation. The military is actually a branch of the corporation. The corporation is a stock market entity. It has a DUNS number. You can look it up. It says that the chief executive officer is a guy by the name of Obama, and the second one is a guy by the name of Biden. And the number of people that they employ is the exact number of people that are employed by the federal government. This is not anything anybody can dispute. There is no Republic of America. It is a corporation. And that is true in all of the major countries. There's a few of them, Iceland being the prime example. And I want to tell you about that in a second. But the reality is that I'm not fighting to change the government. The government's not there. There is no republic. It's been taken over by a corporation. I have written extensively on it. There is no doubt in the world that what I'm telling you is a falsehood. Because when I heard it, it was from a woman going to a Tea Party rally. And this was very early in the game. And here you got these people and they're going like, something is wrong. I know something's wrong. We better get together and try to fix it. And the Tea Party, in the first election cycle, it made an impact. By the second one, it was a dominant player. By the third one, it had disappeared. Okay, but in the beginning, there was a woman, and she's on a little stage, just a makeshift stage in some kind of a baseball field or something like this. And the woman is telling me the story I just told you, and she was crying. And by the end of it, I was crying, and I didn't even know if she was telling me the truth or not. So I did a lot of research, and absolutely, without a doubt, that woman was telling me the truth. So the same situation of people awakening is, it happened here with the Tea Party. Now they just took them over, made them sound crazy. Everybody forgets about them. But the same situation is happening in Europe, where the people are coming awake. Now they know something's wrong, they just don't exactly know what it is. So they can jump on something like, let's leave the EU because, of the immigration problem. Okay? Because they're trying to wake up. So even if it's a falsehood, when they learn about these falsehoods, because it's like you say, Bill, it's just happening faster and faster, the information is getting out faster and faster. So I agree with you. This is a total takedown. Now, when Nora mentioned Iceland and Switzerland, I just get such a tickle about Iceland because it's this little country. It's not any big player or never had been a big player. Yes, it's got oil and it's got a lot of other things. But I want to tell you what happened to Iceland, and I did look it up. Let me just pull it up here. I've done a couple of shows on Iceland, and this information comes from a year ago, June 2015, okay? I'm going to just read through it because I don't want to trust my memory on this. Iceland is beautiful, yet unfortunately unique in how it chose to handle the disaster. It simply let the banks fail, which resulted in defaults totaling $85 billion, lending ample justification for the prosecution and conviction of bank executives for various fraud-related charges. The decision seemed shocking at the time, but the gamble has obviously paid off. Choosing a different route, the U.S. bailed out the banks and let executives off the hook by levying fines that ultimately ended up being paid by the corporations, meaning the executives ostensibly responsible for the mess got off scot-free. Why should we be a part of a society that is not being policed or without responsibility? Special Prosecutor Ulfur Hopkins said, after Iceland's Supreme Court upheld the conviction have held the convictions of 3 bankers and sentenced them between 4 and 5.5 years. It is dangerous that someone is too big to investigate. It gives a sense there is a safe haven. Hopkins, a police officer from a small fishing village, ended up taking the role of special prosecutor after being urged to do so when the first announcement to fill the position drew no applicants. The Icelandic parliament even aided the prosecution's effort by loosening secrecy laws to allow investigations without the hindrance of or requiring court orders. 6 of the 7 convictions that ended up in Iceland's Supreme Court have been upheld, and 5 cases were scheduled for the top courts as of February. An additional 14 cases appear likely to be prosecuted. By contrast, the animosity Americans felt towards the largest financial institutions after the bailout has grown bitter. After the banks pleaded guilty in May for manipulating global currency and interest rates, the court imposed a paltry fine of $5.7 billion, which won't even go to the people most affected by the fraud. Iceland's successful prosecution and economic recovery remain the subject of envy for Americans. Now just imagine saying, good Lord, you people are crazy here. We're not going to bail you out. We're going to put you in jail. That's what the Icelandic people did. Now, yes, they went into a crash, but they came out of it very quickly, and now Iceland's economy is one of the most stable economies in the world. Nobody wants to look at them because they are an example of when people say enough is enough and they don't go along with the BS and the crazy reality that the banks have been pushing on them and say this doesn't make any sense and take action, you turn everything around.
Yeah, Nancy. Oh, sorry, Nora.
No, I was just saying exactly.
Yeah, Nancy, I was going to say something a minute ago before you got on Iceland, but it actually fits better right where you just said it. A lot of people look at that, and I've even seen some propaganda saying that, this, that, and the other, and that the Iceland thing didn't work and what have you, which is just total BS. And, propaganda, as propaganda is used so heavily now. But one of the things I was going to say a minute ago, and I think this is true, I hope everybody agrees with this. One of the things I think we have to do, whether it be the Brits thing, the situation in the U.S., the Iceland, looking at it and saying, well, that's propaganda, coming out saying it's not working when in reality it is. Or anything like that, is, the British vote, as you and Jan were talking about, was about 50%. I think if we look around the world, if you look at the United States, about 50% of the people have a pretty good idea, not necessarily totally what's going on, but that something's damn sure wrong. And there is the other 50%. And when we talk about this global awakening, I think it's really important that we all try, and for me, sometimes this is a stretch, I'll be honest, but we all try to be patient and gentle with the people who haven't woke up, because one of the important things is when you're my age, for example, 65 years old, I'm grateful to be pretty well awake and pretty tuned in with everything and have seen a lifetime of working close enough to see what was going on. But I meet people who have been, let's just say for the sake of a discussion, a lawyer all their life, made good money, bought into the system 100%, believe everything they see on TV, and maybe they're 65, my age. The thing is when we're in this awakening process with patience and with gentleness, it is important because that we think about one thing. If you've been brainwashed all your life to think that Adolf Hitler was a hero, let's say, or that the American way is, about freedom and democracy, which unfortunately is not very true anymore, but if you've been programmed that way all your life, it's not just about breaking programming. It's actually when it becomes part of your DNA and who you are. If you're turning somebody around 180 degrees, And 9/11's a classic example. I've talked to some people who just look at me and they go, I just can't see the government doing that, because they're so into who they are. They have a persona of who they are. And that's where we have to have a little bit of a gentleness, a soft sell, and some patience with these people, is to say, let me just gently show you some things to think about, rather than trying to push too hard, too fast on somebody and having them just throw up the wall and say, I'm not taking that, I'm not listening to that, because we are at a very critical juncture, and I hope you all agree with that.
I do agree, and more importantly, I believe that reality is what you think it is. I firmly believe that. So what I began to realize is that all these people that we call asleep are actually locking in the stability of the reality as they perceive it. Okay? Which means that all of this stuff of Armageddon and the Third World War and, all of the ETs coming down and stuff, it can't happen, because still 50%, or at least the threshold that makes the 100th monkey thing change, those people are holding together. No, it can't, because it's not part of my reality. In the same way that they think that, it's impossible for the government to have done 9/11, they have, it's impossible that we aren't these wonderful people just trying to save the world. That's holding that reality together long enough for us to build another reality. Because you're never going to get these people to wake up if they're waking up into a nightmare. Wake up, the sky is falling. I don't want to wake up. Don't make me wake up. But if you create a reality of love, of appreciation, of the basic morality that you learn in a sandbox, if you bring in the concept of do unto others as you would have done unto yourself as the working mechanism for humanity, and you have this wonderful reality that's sitting right next to theirs, when they start to wake up and they see it, they go, oh, I want to go there.
Yeah. Well, isn't it practiced by example?
That's where I've come to, is that we have actually got to begin to give solutions. That's why when we talk about the bad things, I want to talk about Iceland, because Iceland is an example of what we can do if we just do it.
Amen.
And I think that would be a really powerful example to get introduced into the UK at this moment, because, one of the things I was reading this morning before the show was the fact that there's a complete vacuum there at the moment in terms of, well, now we've chosen this, and, there are people kind of preaching platitudes about it'll either be disaster or it'll all work out all right in the end, but there's no real really coherent alternative being promoted in place of the EU model. And to actually use Iceland as the model would be a great opportunity.
Absolutely. And the thing of it is that the only place that they're getting the information is places like this radio station. That's what's I'm watching it, and I'm watching, the mainstream media is falling apart. If you see what's happening, they used to always have the same story. But now they have, the New York Times is saying one thing and the Washington Post is saying another. Why? Because the whole thing is falling apart and they're starting to take sides. There's not the cohesiveness even in their message. But on the internet, on programs like this that really try to delve into the little details and to then say, well, is this really bad? Well, no, of course not. What's happening is that you got people that are living in a slum. We're used to living in a slum, and they've just built these beautiful new places, that you can go and you can live in, and, they don't want to leave because they're used to the slum. There's this inability to want to, just go out and try something new has been beaten into them.
It's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of the unknown.
It's the fear of the unknown, but it's
to be, yeah.
It's been beaten into them by the very people that want to be in control, who know that they, really need these people beaten down in order to control them. The worst thing that happens is when somebody does, in fact, wake up and say, whoa. And that's what I believe is happening worldwide. And I think that it's happening in ways that we don't even understand. Because I go out there, Colleen, me, all of us, we've all been out here in this arena. And once you begin to talk the talk, people go, oh my God, I understand what you're saying to me. We are getting the ones that are already awake are stumbling around trying to find the answers. And gradually we're all finding each other.
Yeah.
And that's what's taking it down is the awakening. And the more that we focus on taking it down even faster. I mean, I took the 9/11 Crusade book and I put it up as a free PDF. I'm not getting any money from it. Yes, you can still order it from me and I'll even autograph it. But I wanted the information out there. I don't want to wait around for somebody to find it. Please, everybody, you can go to cosmicreality.net and you can go to the Shungite store, go down to the books, and you're going to be able to get a PDF that will tell you what really happened on 9/11. Yes, I wrote it as a fiction. Why did I write it as a fiction? Because no matter how many facts I gave somebody, if they were in the mindset that Bill just described, they would not hear me. So I made a fiction because I wanted to be able to get into the minds of somebody that would have orchestrated such a thing who is not an evil person. It was an evil thing they did, okay? But the reasoning behind some of these people is that they don't even know the full implications of it. But they have a reason. They had reasons for thinking it was a good idea. No, it was not a good idea. But we can't just go around just saying, well, this guy is bad because they did this. You gotta even understand the people that you think are bad have been manipulated into taking certain actions. And it's like, you catch the second guy in the Orlando thing and, I'm going to tell the whole story. Yeah. The more we catch them, the more they realize, the more are going to come out. So I also, Bill, believe that this is another, I don't think it's the first one, I think it's another indicator that it's all coming apart, everybody's waking up, and believe me, there is nothing to fear except fear itself.
Yeah, I agree, Nancy. And, the thing is that you were just saying about the slums, that kind of goes back to what I was saying about being patient and gentle and giving the information, not trying to force something down somebody's throat and doing it, as you said, like writing the book in the fiction sense. You're opening the possibilities in people's minds that might have otherwise thrown up the wall. The slum issue is a classic example too, and this is what, of course, Jan and I's whole mission of A Smiling World is, regardless if it's an individual, a family, a relationship, a business, or anything else. It's about empowerment. And when somebody is taken out of a slum and they're afraid to leave it because it's the life they know, that's exactly what I was talking about when it's part of your DNA to just be grabbed and put over into some other situation, actually probably more detrimental than helpful, because until you empower the person to understand that they have choices, and as Nora said, to establish a belief system, and that there's this divine quantum universe that will give us anything we want if we just adjust our belief system and get aligned with it, that these things are possible. But as we gently move people that direction, one step at a time, then as they become empowered, they sit there and realize, I am not destined to live in a slum. I can go out and I can do this and I can do that, and I don't have to be ashamed to ask for some help if I need help or some guidance. And before long, they're out of that situation. And I just, that goes back to the human family. And these people that are the bad people, they have an agenda and they think what they're doing is right. But if it's not serving the overall good of the rest of humanity, we need to, where possible, maybe move them out of being puppets and manipulated, as you said, and where not possible, to move them into a point of neutrality where they're not able to influence anything. And that's probably what all of this is starting to unravel and unfold.
Nancy, one of the things that I find really interesting is, I think we all share the view that there is some divine organisation behind all of this. And, it's become more and more apparent that there are certain key people that are being put into the position of being part of the old regime in order to really to have a catalyst to really seeing the truth. I mean, your story in itself is an example of that, and how you went into into army intelligence to really understand what was happening behind the scenes. The likes of what's the name of the guy that runs the Thrive project?
Procter Gamble family.
Yeah, he was in the corporate life and came out of it because he didn't believe and has now started Foster Gamble, who's now set up the Thrive movement and created the movie that really exposes the issues around the big corporations. And I'm even working with a client who is part of the diplomatic service, and a member of his family has been at the top of the diplomatic service, who is extremely conscious and awakened and is really, seeing his role as being completely out of that establishment. But without having been in it, he wouldn't have been as aware of the reality of things as he is now. So, there are lots of examples of where people are within that environment that is actually trying to create this agenda, who become aware of what it's all about and choose to move in a different direction, and actually then have the power and the knowledge to influence the outcome.
I totally agree, and I think Snowden is an example of that, because now the light force, okay, the whatever has guided my life to be able to understand so much and to be able to actually do something about it. When you've got Snowden, who is placed by his guides, his own path, whatever, in a position, a unique position where he can access the NSA, and it will be decades before we know exactly what he got. There is so much we still don't know. But the ability of him to have been there had to have been divinely inspired.
Mm.
Is that Eric Snowden?
Yes.
Okay, I just didn't hear. Sorry.
Yeah. Now, his information, I don't know if you know this story, I'll give it to you quickly. His information actually was given to certain anonymous groups before he ever went public. And they initially thought, well, kind of fruitcake, but then as they started looking at it, it was like, oh my God, this guy is really the real thing. And so it forced the anonymous groups that were very anonymous, they were just copying the same group title, to come together. Now, I know this because of Bill Brockbrader, who is part of that group. He actually was put out in the public in order to keep people distracted, to keep his story out there, while they started manipulating behind the scenes until they had enough of the information understood. I mean, they had to actually set up an intelligence organization within the anonymous groups in order to be able to even get a handle on the information that Snowden had provided them. But once they did, and once they began to, because NSA wasn't just looking at you and me, they were also looking at everybody else, including the bad guys. So what they were able to do, the anonymous groups, was to go through this information and discover who the bad guys really are. Not the ones at the top, not the names we know, but the ones that are the third echelon people who actually is in any bureaucratic situation. It's always the third echelon that keeps everything going. Okay? And that's what they targeted. It was the third echelon to be able to say, okay, how is this guy in this whole organization thing? And then, because of the information they got from NSA, they even were able to determine what kind of blackmail information was on some of these people. Okay? In other words, the reason that a lot of these people are controlled is because they've done something bad. And the bad guys know this and say, we're going to, let everybody know this if you don't play ball. So the anonymous groups got this information and they went to the bad guys and they said, well, now we know it. And it's going to come out one way or the other, but you want to be on the white side or the black side? And so much more in that story about the manipulation of the oil and the oil prices and what's happening with gold and silver. It goes on and on. But you're absolutely right, Jan. It's the fact that whatever light guidance is helping human beings. They took a very courageous man and put him in a position that never should have even existed, that he could have had access like that.
True.
You know? And the more you see that, I mean, I'm here, I'm making noise, you guys are making noise, Nora's making noise, Colleen is making massive noise because she's producing us all. And, you know, it's because we followed a divine path. Yeah. And we're not alone. So I suspect absolutely that those people who are in the positions that they are in many cases, are in fact light workers who simply have not woken up yet.
And I want to make you chuckle, Nancy. You know, when all of this boils down and all unravels, everybody will realize it's not about currencies, it's not about gold and silver, it's actually about shungite.
I will okay that one too. Yes. Absolutely. Well, because that's so much a part of it. I mean, if you guys have read my book, so you know that, you know, it was my realization that from science, that, you know, there's gotta be, you cannot have manifestation without consciousness. There has to be a consciousness here. And when I agreed to work with her, she gives me shungite. And shungite is absolutely the most amazing kind of thing. We keep finding out more and more and more about it. So yes, there is a divine inspiration in everything that we are doing. And when you get far enough down the road, you know, when you really feel that, when you can say, well, look at this and how has it come together and stuff. That's when these people will wake up, when they start hearing us talk about how great it is, how, you know, my life is so much better because I'm working with Guy and I'm working with other people in the light to just, you know, unravel this terrible matrix that's around us so that we can all become what we should become. You know, I mean, go ahead.
And we do create our reality. I absolutely agree, because, you know, you get to a level where the people that you attract around you are of that same vibration, and that's what we found. In fact, we've got this incredible knack of kind of repelling the people who don't resonate with us without any intervention at all. They just move away.
Yep.
And too, you know, there's as Nora said, you know, and you have said, and Jan and I know, you know, once you understand that great divinely backed quantum field, I mean, you can create any reality you want. I had somebody ask me the other day, I mentioned that I never got my new driver's license because I ordered it online and it never came. And they said, well, you know, it's supposed to come in 30 days, you know, you need to check on that and get that. And I just looked at him, I said, I've got the receipt. I paid for it. I said, I don't need to check on it. I don't need to worry about it, because I'll tell you something. I'll drive another 25, 30 years. I'm never going to be stopped. I will never, ever have another encounter with law enforcement concerning my driver's license anyway. So it doesn't matter if I got one or not. And I do lots of things that way. I'm not going to say one on the radio, but I divorced a major part of the U.S. government about 30 years ago. And I just told them, kiss my backside. And I said, when my Social Security comes due, you can have anything you want out of it. I'm not going to collect Social Security. You can have that, but I don't ever want to hear from you about anything else about money that I owe you. You just take it out of money I've already given you. And never heard a word. And the NSA, I know you're listening to that, and I don't want you coming banging on my door, because you're just not going to find me. I don't exist.
They got more to worry about than us, you know. Listen,
that's right. That's right.
We're at the top of the hour. Give your website and a little bit of an intro as to what it is you guys are doing over there. And I'm hoping you will agree to come back, because I think that we've got a lot more things to talk about, especially the 21 agenda.
We love you, Nancy. You know we'll come back anytime you want us. I'll let Jan tell you about what we do because she'd probably be more concise. I'd be here till next week.
Okay, well, thank you, Nancy. It's been an absolute joy as ever to be involved with you in a really interesting conversation, actually, and lovely to meet you as well, Nora. And I love your photograph, by the way, absolutely beautiful.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure as well for me.
And thanks, Colleen, for doing a great job again. Just to say, our website is asmilingworld.org, and really our function is to promote empowerment, conscious business and conscious living. So I'm really focused very much on coaching people in consciousness and empowerment with some involvement in supporting holistic businesses in being successful. And Bill's focus is very much around conscious business and again helping businesses to be profitable in a way that really is in alignment with the direction that we all want to go. And here we have a new website that is related to that business activity, which is at successfrequency.com.
And I must say, Jan not only is a certified internet consultant and marketer, Jan also certified life coach, certified executive coach, and now she's even got the diplomatic services around the world involved. So things are moving along, and as I tend to do, I can pretty well guarantee any business that I can increase their profits dramatically and double their profits and put 10 or 20, 30, 40,000 of extra revenue in there. But most importantly is when Jan says conscious business, it is about treating people correctly. That means taking care of employees and taking care of customers and realizing we're all one big family. When they do that, you wouldn't believe how the profits skyrocket, and they go, wow, this really works.
Well, Nora, want to say bye to our audience until next week?
Yes, thank you so much, both Bill and Jan. It was really a pleasure meeting you, and I really hope that we do this again sometime very soon. And thanks for all of you listeners. It's always lovely every time I'm on. Thank you so much. Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, Colleen.
Thank you, Nora, Bill, Jan. Yeah, we got to do this. Maybe, I'll get with you offline, and we'll figure the next step.
That'll be great. Lovely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Jan and I send all of you, Colleen, Nancy, Nora, all of you, and all the listeners, a huge hug. We're very huggy people.
Yes, I know you are. And I'm still.
I cut people.
Someday we all got to get together in the 3D for one group hug. Let's just envision that. I just got this flash in my head of everybody in the world holding hands.
Yeah.
Let's just, and then hugging each other. This is the new reality. It's the top of the hour. I gotta go. Love you all out there. Thanks so much for being here and just giving your insights. It's just been marvelous. This is Haggie Shack Radio production, simulcast over Wolf Spirit Radio. That's wolfspiritradio.com, haggieshack.com, and both of those places will take your money. Just donate to us because this is the only way that we stay on. None of us get paid for this. Not the guests, not the hosts, not the producers, but we do need the money to keep up on the internet. Thank you so very much. Everybody be safe. And Colleen, it's yours, hon.